The world of R&B has always been built on passion, emotion, and intimate connection, but sometimes that intensity spills over into places it should never go. Behind the harmonies and chart-topping collaborations, some of the genre's biggest names have allegedly crossed lines that destroyed friendships, broke up groups, and left devastation in their wake. These aren't just stories about infidelity. They're about betrayal at the deepest level, where trust between brothers in music was shattered by actions that could never be undone. What makes these situations particularly painful is that they often happen between people who built their careers together, shared stages, and called each other family. Here are 10 shocking stories about R&B stars that allegedly slept with their co-stars' wives. Usher and TLC's Chili, the Rozonda Thomas situation. When Usher began dating Rozonda "Chili" Thomas from TLC in the early 2000s, it seemed like a perfect pairing of R&B royalty. But according to multiple industry sources, the relationship allegedly began while Chili was still involved with producer Dallas Austin, who had fathered her son and worked extensively with Usher's mentor, L.A. Reid. The situation became complicated because Austin and Usher moved in overlapping circles in the Atlanta music scene, with Austin having produced for artists on Reid's label. While Chili and Austin were never married, sources close to the situation have indicated that the relationship between Chili and Usher began before her situation with Austin was clearly finished. The overlap created tension in the tight-knit Atlanta R&B community, where Austin was a powerful figure who had helped launch TLC's career. People who worked with both men during that period described an uncomfortable atmosphere when they would end up at the same industry events. Austin reportedly felt betrayed, not just by the romantic situation, but by what he saw as Usher's lack of respect for the unwritten codes of the music business. The relationship between Usher and Chili lasted several years and was highly publicized, but it eventually ended with Chili accusing Usher of infidelity. The irony wasn't lost on people who knew how the relationship had allegedly started. Industry insiders from that era have suggested that the messy beginning set a pattern that would eventually come back around. Teddy Riley and Gene Griffin's wife, the Blackstreet betrayal. The implosion of Blackstreet, one of the most successful R&B groups of the 90s, allegedly had roots in a devastating personal betrayal. According to multiple former group members and people close to the situation, Teddy Riley allegedly became involved with the wife of original Blackstreet member Dave Hollister's close associate and fellow member. The details of exactly who was involved have been disputed over the years, with different former members telling slightly different versions of the story. What's consistent across the accounts is that Riley allegedly crossed a line with a woman who was married to someone in the group's immediate circle. Former Blackstreet member Chauncey Black spoke in interviews years later about the betrayal that led to the group's dissolution, though he was careful about naming specific names. He described a situation where trust within the group was completely destroyed by Riley's alleged actions, making it impossible to continue working together. Other members corroborated that personal issues, specifically involving infidelity within the group's extended family, were the real reason Blackstreet kept breaking up and reforming with different lineups. Riley has generally avoided addressing these specific allegations directly, instead focusing on the business and creative differences that he claimed caused the group's problems. But people who were part of the Blackstreet organization during their peak years have consistently pointed to this alleged betrayal as the moment when the brotherhood of the group was irreparably broken. Bobby Brown and New Edition, the Ralph Tresvant rumors. Long before Bobby Brown's tumultuous marriage to Whitney Houston, there were persistent rumors within the R&B community about his behavior during his time with New Edition. One of the most damaging allegations that circulated involved Ralph Tresvant's first wife, although the details have never been fully confirmed and have been denied by those involved. According to people who were around New Edition during their peak years, Brown's reputation for crossing boundaries with women extended to situations that created tension within the group. Multiple sources from that era have suggested that part of Brown's eventual departure from New Edition wasn't just about his desire to go solo or creative differences, but about personal betrayals that made it impossible for the group to continue functioning. Tresvant, known as the nice guy of the group, reportedly dealt with situations involving his then-girlfriend that created friction with Brown. These alleged incidents were never made public at the time, with the group and their management keeping a tight lid on any internal drama that could damage their teen idol image. Former members of the New Edition organization have alluded to these tensions in later interviews, speaking carefully about conflicts that went beyond just music. The vagueness of the allegations has allowed them to remain in the realm of rumor, but people who worked closely with the group during those years consistently point to personal betrayals, not just professional ambitions, as a major factor in the bad blood between Brown and other members. Al B. Sure and Diddy, the Kim Porter connection. The complicated relationship between Al B. Sure, Diddy, and the late Kim Porter involves allegations that have circulated in the industry for decades. Sure and Porter had a relationship in the late 80s that produced their son, Quincy. But according to various accounts, the relationship between Porter and Diddy began while she was still involved with Sure, creating a situation that allegedly caused deep resentment. Sure has spoken publicly in recent years about feeling that Diddy interfered in his relationship with Porter, though he's been careful about the specific accusations he makes. In interviews following Porter's death in 2018, Sure made cryptic comments about the circumstances of her passing and his concerns about what happened in her relationship with Diddy. People who knew all three during the late 80s and early 90s have described a complicated situation where Porter was allegedly torn between two men in the music industry, both of whom were at pivotal points in their careers. What made the situation particularly complex was that Sure and Diddy had worked in overlapping circles. Sure was signed to Uptown Records, where Diddy got his start as an intern and then A&R executive. The proximity meant that the personal drama played out in professional settings, creating awkwardness and tension. Industry veterans from that era have suggested that the situation between Sure and Diddy over Porter created a rift that never fully healed, with implications that went beyond just romantic rivalry into questions of loyalty and respect within the music business. Genuine and Aaliyah's circle, the Missy Elliott situation. While never confirmed and strongly denied by those involved, rumors persisted in the late 90s about complicated relationship dynamics within the tight-knit creative circle that included Genuine, Missy Elliott, and Timbaland. According to industry gossip from that era, there were allegations of romantic entanglements that created tension within the Swing Mob family that had all worked together in Devontae Swing's basement. Some sources suggested that Genuine allegedly became involved with someone who was romantically linked to another producer in their circle, creating fractures in relationships that had been both professional and personal. The rumors were never substantiated and may have been entirely false, but they circulated widely enough within the R&B community to cause speculation about why certain collaborations stopped happening and why some members of that creative family seemed to distance themselves from each other. Missy Elliott has always been extremely private about her personal life, and Genuine has similarly avoided discussing his romantic history in detail. What's clear is that the incredibly productive period when that group of artists was working together closely eventually ended, with various members going in different directions both personally and professionally. Whether relationship drama played any role in that dissolution remains a matter of speculation. But people who were part of that scene have occasionally hinted at personal complications that went beyond just creative differences or career evolution. Keith Sweat and Johnny Gill, the alleged love triangle. Two of New Jack Swing's biggest voices allegedly found themselves in conflict over a woman in the early 90s, according to people who were part of the R&B scene during that era. While specific names were rarely mentioned publicly, industry insiders have long spoken about tension between Sweat and Gill that reportedly stemmed from romantic competition. Sources from that period describe a situation where both men were allegedly involved with the same woman, possibly overlapping in a way that created bad blood between two artists who had been friendly colleagues. The alleged situation was said to involve someone connected to the music industry, possibly another artist or someone who worked in the business, making the drama play out in spaces where both men would regularly cross paths. People who worked with both Sweat and Gill during the early to mid-90s noticed that the two seemed to avoid each other at industry events and never collaborated despite being in the same musical lane and having worked with many of the same producers. Some attributed this to simple competition between two major artists in the same genre, but others suggested there was personal animosity rooted in romantic conflict. Neither artist has ever publicly addressed these rumors, and it's entirely possible they're exaggerated or fabricated. However, the consistency with which these stories appeared in R&B industry circles during that era suggests there may have been at least some truth to the tension between them, even if the specific details were embellished over time. Devante Swing and Casey, the Jodeci family drama. The legendary R&B group Jodeci, consisting of two sets of brothers, allegedly dealt with internal conflicts that went beyond typical sibling rivalry. According to people who were close to the group during their peak years in the early to mid-90s, there were allegations of inappropriate behavior between group members' romantic partners that created deep rifts. The specific details have been kept largely private, with the group members rarely discussing the personal issues that contributed to their eventual breakup. However, former associates of Jodeci have suggested that Devante Swing, the group's primary producer and creative force, allegedly crossed boundaries with women who were involved with other members of the group or their immediate circle. These alleged incidents reportedly happened during the height of Jodeci's fame, when the group was living and working in intense proximity, and the lines between brotherhood and business became increasingly blurred. Casey Haley, lead singer of the group, has spoken in interviews about the dysfunction within Jodeci, though he's typically focused on issues of addiction and creative control rather than personal betrayals. But people who worked with the group during their peak have indicated that personal drama involving women was a significant factor in the tension that eventually made it impossible for the original lineup to continue. The group's multiple breakups and troubled reunions have been attributed to various factors over the years, but those closest to the situation consistently point to personal betrayals within the group's inner circle as wounds that never fully healed. Tank and Tyrese, the alleged connection. Singer Tank and actor-singer Tyrese Gibson, who had been close friends and frequent collaborators, allegedly experienced a serious rift around 2017 that was rumored to involve romantic complications. While the specific details were never confirmed publicly, social media activity and industry gossip suggested that Tank may have become involved with someone romantically linked to Tyrese. The two men had been extremely close, with Tank producing music for Tyrese and the two regularly appearing together at events and in social media posts showing their brotherhood. But around 2017, both men began making cryptic posts that industry observers interpreted as being about each other and about a situation involving betrayal. Tyrese posted emotional videos discussing being hurt by people he considered brothers, while Tank made statements about following his heart even when it complicated friendships. Neither man directly confirmed what happened, but people close to both suggested that a romantic situation had caused the rift between them. Other artists in their circle seemed to take sides, with some maintaining relationships with both men and others clearly aligning with one or the other. By 2019, the two appeared to have reconciled to some degree, with both making public statements about moving past whatever had come between them. However, people who knew them before and after the alleged incident noted that the friendship never seemed to return to its previous level of closeness, suggesting that whatever happened had caused damage that couldn't be entirely repaired. Jaheim and his Philadelphia circle. The soulful singer from New Brunswick, New Jersey, allegedly dealt with drama within his close-knit circle of friends and collaborators that involved romantic entanglements with partners of people he considered family. According to sources from the Philadelphia and New Jersey R&B scene, where Jaheim emerged in the early 2000s, there were situations where his involvement with women created tension with producers and other artists he worked with. The allegations were never made fully public, but industry people from that region have spoken about incidents where Jaheim allegedly crossed lines with women who were involved with men in his professional circle. What made these situations particularly problematic, according to people familiar with them, was that Jaheim often emphasized his loyalty and his connection to his neighborhood and the people he came up with. The alleged betrayals stood in stark contrast to the image he cultivated of being a stand-up guy who valued loyalty above all else. Some former associates have suggested that these personal issues contributed to Jaheim's eventual withdrawal from the mainstream music industry, as relationships that had been essential to his career became strained or severed. While Jaheim has remained largely out of the public eye in recent years, occasionally performing and recording, people who worked with him during his peak years point to personal drama and burned bridges as significant factors in why he never maintained the level of success his early albums suggested he would achieve. Joe and his producer circle allegations. R&B singer Joe, known for his romantic ballads and vocal ability, allegedly experienced conflicts with producers and collaborators over the years that involved romantic situations. While Joe has kept his personal life largely private, there have been persistent rumors within the industry about complicated relationships that affected his professional partnerships. According to people who worked in R&B production circles during Joe's peak years in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were situations where his romantic involvements created awkwardness or tension with the teams he was working with. The specific details of these alleged incidents have remained vague, with no one involved making public statements about what happened. However, industry observers noticed that Joe seemed to cycle through producers and collaborators more frequently than many of his peers, often moving to new production teams after successful albums, rather than maintaining long-term working relationships. Some attributed this to artistic restlessness or Joe's desire to explore different sounds, but others suggested there were personal factors that made continued collaboration difficult. Former members of various production teams have occasionally hinted in interviews about personal complications that arose during recording sessions, though they've been careful not to name specific situations or people. The pattern of brief, intense collaborations followed by complete breaks became a hallmark of Joe's career. And while this could simply reflect the normal evolution of artistic relationships, those close to the situations have suggested that romantic entanglements played a role in at least some of these professional endings.